Hello and welcome to episode 109 of the Dash News podcast. I'm Mark Mason and I'm joined by my fellow amigos, Joel and Justin. How's it going?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, Justin?
I'm doing awesome.
Very dashy.
Extremely dashy.
Excellent. Looking very dashy as well. And this week we're welcoming back Brian, aka Mastermind. Happy Friday, Brian.
How's it going?
Excellent. All set, ready to go. And we have a blockbuster podcast this week for you. We have Dash Call Group CEO Ryan Taylor. Welcome back to the podcast, Ryan.
Thank you. It's been a while, so happy to be on.
Yeah, so much has been going on.
I see a crypt phone in the background there, don't I?
Yeah. There is a crypt phone sample back there.
Nice. Does it work? Is it good by modern standards for you? Or is it still like, you'd rather use your real one?
This one is sealed in the box. And I use it when I'm talking with people here in the office, and it makes it more real for people when they can see it. And you can explain that there are tens of thousands of these units already in use. And so and they pick it up and they feel that it's heavy and it's substantial. So it works well to have one of those samples in the office.
Fantastic.
Excellent. Right. Well, earlier on in the week, I reached out to the Masternode network to let them know that Ryan was coming on the podcast and to submit some questions. So as our time is limited with Ryan, and this is a special occasion, we have some questions that have been submitted by the community that we will be asking. But before we get into those questions, there is a more pressing issue that I would like to first address with Ryan. So those that are unfamiliar or new listeners to the podcast, there is something called DIF, Dash Investment Foundation. Yes, it sounds exciting. If this is the first time that you've heard about it, you can go to blog.dash.org and you can read all the information and find out all the extra goodies. I would love to talk about the podcast all about that, but we're short on time. So that's the first thing out the way. Secondly, this is for Masternode operators watching and listening. There is currently an election going on for supervisors for the Dash Investment Foundation.
That's right.
And if you go to dashwatchbeta.org, dashwatchbeta, all one word, there are the supervisors candidate list. You can look at the profiles of them, and voting ends on July the 2nd. So make sure you get those votes in and check them out. So that's a little bit of a background with Dash Investment Foundation. And in this treasury cycle, there is a Dash Investment Foundation proposal up. And there has been a little few concerns of the network. So while we have this opportunity with Ryan here, I thought it would be a great idea to ask Ryan for his thoughts on these things. Now, there seems to be two pressing issues that have been raised. The first issue is the expense, the cost of the proposal. The second issue that has been raised is the directors, Glenn Kennedy and Casey McDonald, as they're actually mentioned in the blog post. There was forward guidance on this. However, some people in the network are unfamiliar with these individuals. So I'm hoping we can take this time now for Ryan to give his thoughts, firstly, on the expenses, and secondly, on the two directors, how they came about, and a bit of a backstory.
Sure. Well, on the expenses, I have seen some of the comments on the proposal. The proposal is for approximately $180,000. That is spread over, $160,000 spread over 2 months, I believe. Basically, there's been a couple of concerns about it. One is, that's an awful lot of money for a shell corporation, has been kind of a common comment. And, you can get shell corporation services for much cheaper. So is this some kind of money grab? I think is kind of the sentiment that I've seen there. And I think it's important to know that, first of all, this is for 2 years of operating expenses. And it includes all of the services that surround Dash Investment Foundation, including the bookkeeping services, legal work, the cost of submitting documents to the Cayman government there. It includes a number of different items, not simply the day-to-day folks that will be operating it. The other aspect of it is that around 30,000 of those funds are contingencies. If 2 years from now the network decides not to renew the operating funds, those funds would be used to dissolve the entity and pay for all of that legal work. So they may never be spent. In other words, if we don't use them, they would roll over into the next proposal period. So the true cost of operating this thing for 2 years is actually $30,000 less than the proposal amount when those considerations are taken into account. The second thing is that this isn't a shell corporation. Look up what a shell corporation is, and yes, you can get one for $3,000 a year or something. But shell corporations are passive. They have no operational activity. They do not typically hold a great deal of assets. They are typically there to hold something specific for tax purposes or for privacy purposes or other reasons, but they don't operate anything. And that's why you can operate them for cheaply. What Dash Investment Foundation is an operating entity. And that's a very different animal. They are doing their own accounting work. They are doing their own legal work and engaging in negotiations. They are active participants in the investments that reside within that portfolio. And directors are a required position by law that you have to have. And when you're asking someone to put in many hours every single month into facilitating all of this activity, there are costs to that. And $3,000 a year comes out to a couple $100 a month. Well, that just isn't going to happen. Comparing a shell corporation to what Dash Investment Foundation is meant to do is comparing apples and oranges. What I can tell you is that when you do the math, the operating expenses, excluding contingencies, comes out to a little over $5,000 a month. That is not an egregious expense, and it's actually much lower than what these same directors typically charge a client for similar services. Now, as far as the directors themselves, they're very experienced. They have performed in the director role, and in fact, this is what they typically do: is perform in the director role for offshore funds, taking an active role in the management of those funds, and they do typically charge more for these services. They became very intrigued with what we were doing. It's really a first. They have never seen an ownerless or memberless investment fund before. And so they became personally interested in it and wanted to work with us. I believe we've been working with them since about January. And they have put in a substantial amount of time into understanding our model, understanding what's valuable to the network, understanding a lot of the nuances of our proposal system. They were the ones that put this proposal up to the network. And so, that they, I think, are big supporters of what we're trying to do. I know that they plan on posting a statement that gives people more familiarity with who they are and what their backgrounds are to provide more information. I believe that's going to happen today. I don't know that for certain, but I think that will happen today, and maybe that will provide people with a little more information about what they do on a day-to-day basis and how they add value to the process. So, I think a lot of the concerns that I've seen raised are simply a lack of understanding of what Dash Investment Foundation is going to do and how it differs from a shell corporation, because that's not what this is.
Thank you for clearing that up, Ryan. And just a reminder that the proposal voting finishes in 7 days. So if you are a masternode operator and you haven't voted yet, I would encourage you to go check out that proposal and definitely vote. We need this proposal to pass to have the Dash Investment Foundation up and running. That, as I said before, an election for supervisors is up as well. So make sure you check out the candidates. Thank you, Ryan, for addressing that.
Yeah.
Now, the Dash Investment Foundation is a hot topic. As I mentioned previously, I reached out to the network for questions for this podcast.
And there were a lot.
There's a lot of questions, and
Yeah.
the Dash Investment Foundation was the most popular subject. So if you're not watching this live or listening, in the following days after the recording, I will add questions with timestamps so you can move to the point of interest for you. Now, we have, I think, about 20 or so questions, so we'll try and get through them as much as possible. If there is time at the end, I'll try and take some questions from the Q&A live chat. So feel free to talk amongst yourselves, and we'll take it in turns to ask Ryan questions without trying to make it seem too much like an interrogation. So while we're on the subject of the Dash Investment Foundation, let's kick it off. I'd like to pass it off to Joel to ask the first question.
Sure.
All right, let me check this out. So, do you think that the Dash Investment Foundation should make specific treasury proposals to fund each individual investment it wants to make? Or do you think it should make general proposals for funds to be invested as per the foundation's general investment strategy?
Well, let me caveat my answer by saying my answer is irrelevant. What I want to happen is irrelevant because this was designed intentionally to be controlled by the network through the supervisors. There are supervisors that are being elected right now. If you're a masternode owner, check out their stance on some of these questions, and you should elect the people that are representing the viewpoint that you have on how this should be handled. And by the way, the right answer to this question can change over time based on the scale of the treasury at that point in time. If the treasury were producing $100 million a month, you could imagine that the network wouldn't even want to vote on each individual investment opportunity. They'd be voting on hundreds every month and probably wouldn't have the capacity to. At our current scale, I would say that there's a strong possibility that that might be optimal for several reasons. One, it could alleviate the need to have an investment manager at this point in time, which could save considerable expenses on the cost of operating the Dash Investment Foundation. I think that early on, there's a backlog of different opportunities, and it's difficult, I would say, to understand where the network's priorities are on those types of opportunities, and it might be a valuable tool to understand where the network would like to guide the Dash Investment Foundation. As an example, there's a fundamental question of should we be optimizing for risk-adjusted returns within this entity in order to provide a financial foundation for the network, or should we be investing in projects that they're for-profit projects, but will primarily benefit the network by improving the capabilities of the network or expanding the functionality of the network and adding value to it that way. And I think that that's a good means to get that question answered. My own hypothesis is that I think early on, the Dash Investment Foundation will likely, based on comments I've seen from some of the supervisors as well as from the community, focus on increasing the capabilities of the network and not so much on absolute investment returns. It does open up new possibilities for the network. I think that the grant system can only get you so far. Grant system works great for cost centers or areas that aren't meant to generate a profit, like the code creation, like what we do for the network. But when it comes to funding startups and things, there's definitely a more efficient mechanism here than purely a grant system.
Excellent. Brian?
Yeah, is there any like legal implications? I mean, if we make a profit with that, are we able to reinvest that into, say, like Google stock or something like that, or maybe like Kraken has an exchange? And that kind of goes into the other question about burning it. People wanted to explain the advantages of burning the Dash rather than, I guess, investing it.
Yeah, I mean, the short answer is Dash Investment Foundation can really invest in anything that is, legal as an investment product. So that can mean equity, it can mean debt, it can mean commodities like cryptocurrencies. Really, anything is open, and it's up to the guidance of the supervisors to really set the direction for Dash Investment Foundation. And so it will be interesting to see how that evolves, particularly when investments reach maturity. Say we fund a startup and eventually that goes through a Series A round or something, and the network receives a chunk of, or Dash Investment Foundation receives a chunk of money from that initial investment. Well, what should it do with it? I think that's a fundamental question that the supervisors will be responsible for answering. As far as whether or not they would reinvest that into the ecosystem or maybe temporarily put it into a regular investment fund so that it's in real assets and owns portions of companies or something, I think that remains to be seen, and it's anybody's guess. I believe that the network will continue to invest in its own ecosystem more than likely. I think there'll be heavy pressure, or at least an influence to go that direction. But there's no reason to say it can't just invest in anything that would generate a return. As far as the question of how does buying Dash and burning it benefit anyone, I think that the answer is this behaves, should the network decide to go this route. I imagine the supervisors would be the ones that would have a significant influence on their stance under a given scenario, whether or not we should continue to invest or should use it to purchase Dash and make Dash more scarce. Once they make that decision, if they were to make the decision to allocate that towards Dash, they could choose to lock those funds away in Dash or actually destroy the Dash. In the act of destroying Dash, I think that what you're doing essentially is you're removing some of the supply from the marketplace. And in so doing, you make Dash incrementally rarer, and all else being equal, the market cap being equal, that means a higher price per Dash than would otherwise be the case. And this is best illustrated by looking at two networks like Ethereum and XRP, right? Ethereum is, something like 1,000 times less quantity, and therefore supports a much higher price at the same market or at roughly equal market caps. XRP is something like 20 cents and Ethereum is $200. That doesn't make XRP more valuable as a network, simply because they have more of them. And so I think, when you decrease the supply, all else being equal, the price of Dash would result in a higher price. Does that make sense? I don't know if I explained that well, but it's a bit like a stock buyback. Companies do a stock buyback to make there be fewer shares on the market.
Deflation.
Yes. So a couple questions on that general principle, and apologies if it's some of this may be a little bit devil's advocate-y. if that's even a term. But first, one of the attractive bits about cryptocurrency, at least the main original ones, like Bitcoin, for example, has been the sort of immutable supply idea that there will only be 21 million, or Dash's case, 18 or 19 million. It's only going to be a certain amount. It cannot be manipulated by anyone. It's kind of set in stone, and there's a lot of trust that goes along with that. So if the supply is open to being manipulated, even if it's just in a downward direction of fewer things, do you see any way that that could have an effect on the confidence in the supply, in storing their wealth in Dash by just the greater community? Not that they're worried that it would be inflated, but just the fact of, well, if it can be changed, then maybe it could be changed in the wrong direction.
Yeah. Well, as far as first of all cryptocurrencies, there is a portion that gets destroyed all the time. It gets destroyed because somebody dies and doesn't leave their private keys to anyone. It gets destroyed because someone sends it to an old address, to a wallet that's no longer in use or available to anyone. It gets destroyed because they forget that they have it. Like it's sitting in a file somewhere and no one has access to it. All cryptocurrencies have this occur. And this has happened within Dash. We're aware of people that have lost their wallet or failed to write down their seed phrase. It doesn't fundamentally destroy the value of the cryptocurrency itself. In fact, it has the opposite effect. The supply effectively has dropped. An increased supply is, it can be a bad thing, obviously, because it dilutes everyone's holdings. But buying some and destroying it can only have a positive impact on the value. It cannot have a negative impact. Increased supply is associated with a lower price, and decreased supply is associated with a higher price. So personally, I don't see any downside in this as far as the scarcity of it. Our own algorithm, by the way, was designed to increase or decrease the supply to miners, if you recall, back in 2014, early 2015, based on the amount of mining that was occurring, or the total hash rate of the network. When it dropped too low, the rewards went up. And so we had a variable supply within a range early on. Of course, we've got such a high hash rate at this point that will likely never be triggered again. But what is important is to have an upper limit on the supply. That is an important attribute to have. And it's important to have that over any given time period. That will continue to be the case. We will continue to have a upper supply limit over any given period of time. What might occur is it might be lower. No one that holds Dash should complain about that. Like there's no logical reason to say, wait. There's not enough Dash out there, to decrease the value per unit. That's kind of a silly argument to make. But I look, if this is a bad idea and people don't like the idea of destroying Dash for whatever the reason is, if it's because they have an emotional attachment to every Dash is precious, or they just think that the funds are better used, reinvested in the network, or they think they're better off investing it in real assets that can back what the network stands for, that's up to the supervisors. If the network doesn't like this idea, they should elect supervisors that are opposed to the idea of ever destroying a Dash. If they like the idea, they should elect supervisors that will do it. The protocol allows it to occur. It's allowed to occur with Bitcoin or any other cryptocurrency. And not many people do it, because generally buying up some Dash and then destroying it is not in your own self-interest. But this entity's mission is to support the network in whatever fashion it can, and mostly that's going to be through investing. If it can't find a good use for funds, this is always an option. So I don't think it'll happen often. That's my own hypothesis, but the mechanism is there. And that was an important element of the design to me, is to be able to truly back the network by being able to support it in a financial fashion.
Excellent. Thank you, Ryan. Yeah,
Satisfied.
there was a lot of questions actually asked about the burn rate and the burn-in of Dash. So it seems to have struck a chord with a lot of the network. One of the questions was, can Ryan explain about the burn of Dash? And I think you just covered that pretty well. There was an additional question. Does Brian think the Dash Investment Foundation should take a masternode vote every time it proposes to buy and burn Dash with its profits, rather than reinvest its profit into its investment strategy? Now, I know you answered that saying it's down to the supervisors.
Yeah, I mean,
but what do you think?
I mean, again, my opinion is irrelevant, and I designed it to be that way, right? Like, I don't get to make this call. So you can
seem to be the smart guy in the room, so people are curious to know what your personal thoughts are.
Well, I think that it's a very strategic question. It is a very important question. And if I were a supervisor, I wouldn't feel comfortable making that decision on behalf of the network without having a formal mechanism to gauge the response, for a few reasons. One is, I as a supervisor would want to serve the desires of the network and the desires of the users. And I wouldn't be sure of myself if I were making that decision. And look, the mechanism is there. You can go to the network and you can ask. That's the beauty of the proposal system, is you can actually put a decision proposal up to the network and say, hey, which of these two options do you support? And or put up a specific proposal and say, hey, we're proposing burning 100,000 Dash. How do you feel about that? Like, that could happen someday. So I think that I think myself personally, I think if I were in that position, I would feel most comfortable going to the network to either support it or provide other feedback. And there's a formal mechanism to do that.
What is your position in the diff? Aren't you on there for the first couple of years? Is that right?
No, I don't have a formal position. Again, I did not want to have my feet in two different places within the network. I intentionally, set it up in a way where it has full independence from Dash Core Group. I don't think an entity can be good at both things, both at being a great investment vehicle and really good at building the network itself and doing the business development strategy around it to kind of bring product and strategy together. Like, those are two very different things. And so I felt like these should be wholly separate entities. What I have committed to is to join all of their meetings with the supervisors and the directors, answer questions. What was the intent behind this? What were you thinking when you did it? Why is this here in the bylaws or whatever? And answer questions, provide any advice that I can. I mean, this is obviously an area that I know well. I know payments well. I know investing well. I think I can be helpful, but I don't feel like I should have a vote. I don't feel like I should have control or power over there. And so I've absolved myself from any position of authority there. But I do, I was asked by Glenn and Casey whether I would be willing to participate in the conversations and provide guidance. And I said, yes, I think that can be helpful. And I'm happy to provide some of my time to the team. So that I think people have conflated that with, well, I'm going to be part of the organization, and that's not true. I'm simply going to attend the meetings and be available to them should any questions arise or any guidance be needed.
Excellent. Joel, Justin?
I think it's pretty cool. Yeah, that's there's a lot of chit chatter around the burning question thing. It is the burning question in everyone's hearts and minds. And
It's a hot issue, and I don't even know if it'll ever happen, but yeah.
Yeah, I think it's particularly it's particularly interesting because just in, I mean, understanding of economics and stuff aside, there's a lot of people that just cannot grasp the idea of like taking items and destroying them as something of creating more value. And it's interesting how that whole thing works. Is there a way to come up with a better term than burn or destroy? Because those things sound like, you know, Attila the Hun type stuff. It does not sound like anything good comes from burn it, destroy. You know, it sounds more like a Metallica song than anything.
You could call it. You're right. Maybe I'm using a term that has negative connotations, and a positive one would turn things around here. But I think that, you know, you could call it a buyback. I mean, it's the equivalent of a buyback. And when a company buys back the number of circulating shares and brings them into treasury, their own treasury, non-circulating shares essentially don't exist, right? And so that is the corollary. It is a bit like a buyback. And if that helps to contextualize why that would add value to the remaining, call them, you know, units of Dash, it's the exact same concept, economic concept that you're laying out. Taking Dash out of circulation does nothing to affect the market cap. The market cap, should stay the same, according to economic theory. And what does change is the number of circulating units that market cap gets divided across. And so the per unit economics, all else being equal, like I said, would result in a higher price. So, I mean, this is just, economic theory and practice. I'm not inventing anything new here. And like I said, you can see this very evident in all of the coins that are out there. If they have 2 trillion units, the per unit value is very, very low. And if they have 18 million units like Dash, the value tends to be very, very high. It's a matter of supply and demand. If supply is lower and demand is the same, the price is higher. That's all that people need to understand, I think, to grasp this concept.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. A lot of people don't understand this. They understand that, say, Bitcoin and things like that are sound money. But they don't get into, I guess, the scarcity of it, to where, say, if the market cap of Dash was the same percentage of the market cap of Bitcoin over a 5-year period, or however long, arbitrary number, and you buy the same amount in Dash and Bitcoin, you would have more value in Dash by the end of that, if nothing else changed, just from a smaller total supply of Dash over that time, probably.
There's a lot of economic concepts that are difficult to grasp. A lot of them involve the differences between percentage growth and absolute growth, and people generally have a difficult time grasping some of these concepts, at least when you look across the general population. But that doesn't make them less true. And so look, if people don't like the idea of, Dash being taken out of circulation, they should elect supervisors that are opposed to the idea. And if a vote is ever put up by them in order to do this, they should vote against it. And so if the network desires it to be done, it will be done. If the network doesn't desire it to be done, and these are not compelling arguments for the vast majority of people, then it shouldn't be done. So, again, my own views on it are irrelevant. I wanted to make sure the option was there.
Yeah, the only other diff-related question that I specifically had was, so regarding investing in other companies, et cetera, that do not directly deal with Dash. So say you threw some money, if you threw some money into, say, Purse or something like that, Purse.io, and through part of that deal, we got them to accept Dash. That would increase Dash's utility. If the company would do that better, everything would be great. We're talking about throwing money into, say, the proverbial Apple stock or something, and then Apple goes up, and how does that affect the valuation of Dash that the Dash Investment Foundation owns increasingly profitable investments, or would they have to actually cash out of those investments and then do a Dash buyback?
Well, what I do think it does is I don't think it necessarily inherently increases the value of Dash explicitly. I think what it could do is it could establish a floor below which would be unlikely to go. And let me provide an example of this just to kind of illustrate the point. Let's say that we got lucky and invested in the next Apple when it launched, and that investment grew to be worth, a hell of a lot of money. And that investment was held by Dash Investment Foundation, which is controlled by the network. Well, if the price of Dash were to drop to, say, $1, and there were 18 million units, you could buy all of Apple for $18 million, essentially. And how that would work is you'd start buying up Dash to the point that you controlled enough of the masternodes on the network to be able to determine who the supervisors were. You would make a vote to take all of that Apple stock and sell it on the open market, generate a bunch of income from that, and start buying Dash with it. And you essentially could drive the price of Dash up a millionfold at that point. And you could liquidate for a huge profit. Now,
so
this is a multi-step process to illustrate kind of a drastic scenario that could develop. In practice, that would never happen, because if Dash Investment Foundation one day owned all of Apple, just as an example, the price of Dash would never fall to $1. Other people would see a similar opportunity brewing as the value of the Dash network dropped to the value of the holdings of Dash Investment Foundation. And so I think that what it does is it essentially would establish a theoretical floor below which I can't imagine that Dash would ever fall. So what that can do is it can eliminate the probability that Dash ever goes to zero, right? I think clearly, if Dash Investment Foundation has value, the value of Dash could not theoretically go to zero. And that may de-risk Dash a little bit for people. Not much, but on the margin, I think it makes a difference. And by de-risking it, perhaps it provides a bit of a enhanced appeal. And so I think on the margins, I think it can. I think the primary benefit, though, I mean, this is all economic theory, right? I mean, we're dealing with issues around the edges. I think the primary benefit and what people should focus on with Dash Investment Foundation is that it makes our entire proposal system more efficient. We've seen the network balk at the idea of funding somebody's startup with a grant that is going to have a high probability of failure. What's in it for us? The small possibility that you're a success and that you take Dash as a form of payment. And so I think what it does is it opens up the possibility for, I'm just going to take an example here, like AB Ride as an example. They put up a proposal and it failed. Now, I don't know the full reasons for the proposal failing, or why everyone voted the way that I did. But if they were able to offer equity to the company or to Dash Investment Foundation and say, "Hey, I'll give you a share of my shares in return," that might have made the difference for them, and they might, have funding for growth at this point. So I think it opens up new possibilities that help bridge the gap and make it more feasible for both the network to fund and for proposal owners to come forward with something of value to the network to say, "Hey, here's what I'm offering in return," besides just, taking Dash as a form of payment. So I think that's the primary benefit, is it's going to make our proposal system more efficient and more capable.
Yeah, there seems to be a lot of fixation on what to do with the profits. Yet really the focus, first stage, we need to actually get those investments in place. So that brings me to the next question from the community that was asked. I would like to know if Dash Core Group already has any projects in mind for the Dash Investment Foundation. Have you been approached by anyone, Ryan?
I've been approached by quite a number of people that have projects. Some of them are known to the community, and just weren't able to get funding previously. And they think that by offering equity or something else of benefit, that they can maybe get it over the line. I've seen new proposals come forward that have said, "Hey, this is what I'd like to do, but I'm waiting for Dash Investment Foundation to come online." I've also seen like companies within our portfolio now. Like when I say our portfolio, like one of our partners that wants to expand their business or do something positive for the network, and are seeking funding to do it. And, oftentimes, if it's a small amount, we can do it with business development funding. But more often than not, I think they're looking for something more substantial. And that's something that Dash Core Group is not comfortable doing without, proper steps in place, and without having some type of position within the company. And that's what Dash Investment Foundation can do for us. So I think there's a number of partners that have ideas. I think initially Dash Investment Foundation will be flooded with requests because there's a backlog. And I think that it'll be very competitive month 1 and 2 and 3, and then it'll start to catch up and be able to reach a better cadence with the network. But there has been kind of a holdback period right now where people are waiting for it to become operational so that they can submit something to them and start to enter into agreements. We've also seen past proposals that said, "Hey, when Dash Ventures, as it was known back then, comes online, I will issue 10% of my company to them." I think that that's interesting because how you can enter into an agreement with an entity that doesn't exist yet. If it comes with a lot of liabilities or some other issue, Dash Investment Foundation may not even want those shares. So we'll have to see how some of those. I'm aware of at least a couple messy situations like that one where they promise something, and I'm not sure how that will play out once it is operational. But we'll deal with these initial backlog of opportunities, as well as the backlog of promises that were made to the network, and then we'll move on from there.
Yeah, these diff questions are not going to be settled. We're going to keep probably debating these for years to go, exactly how to work it and what to do and everything else. Let's move on. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I think you're right, and I think we will stumble in the beginning. This has never been done before, so to pretend like I have all the answers, I don't. But it's designed to be flexible. We will have some failures. My hope is we learn from them, improve the processes that surround it, and do better going forward. And it'll be interesting to see how it does play out. And it'll be interesting to see how it changes as the scale of the operation changes.
Yeah, that's another reason why I think it's really important that masternodes listening really take the time to look at the proposal that's up. As I said, there's only 7 days left, but part of the reason is within that is setting up the structure and the bank accounts and stuff as well. As Ryan said, there is kind of like no right approach to this. If you're a business and you're looking for equity, you could put up a proposal asking the treasurer for funds and in exchange giving equity. Or the supervisors may take the opportunity, once elected, to submit a proposal to the network requesting funds from the treasury to use Dash as they see fit to invest. There's lots of different ways. I'm sure in the first coming months, we'll find the right way and approach. It's going to be a learning process. And Ryan, do you have anything to add to that? I mean, that's how I see things playing out.
Yeah, I mean, at the bottom line is this whole thing is meant to be flexible. It's meant to change. So if it doesn't work, the network itself has the power to change it through the supervisors. The supervisors have the authority to act, and we will get a system that works better at the end of this. Better than a grant-only proposal system that we have in place today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we got a bunch of questions. We got to burn through them pretty fast. One of the popular ones was the SEC no action letter. Is there any updates on that?
Yes. The SEC, as we've seen publicly, is very slow to act. The only no action letter that they have issued to date was for essentially a coupon for flights. It was so obvious that this wasn't a security that a first-year law student could easily identify that it was not a security. Yet it took them 54 phone calls and something like 15 months or 10 months, I think it was, to get that no action letter. I anticipate the more complex situations are going to take even longer. I did not actually believe that it will be possible for any cryptocurrency that already launched to get a no action letter, because the SEC hates to issue them after a asset has been issued. But what I can tell you is this, that prior to October, when we submitted our no action letter request to the SEC, I was getting multiple inquiries a month from exchanges that had been contacted by the SEC on Dash and and asking them for their legal opinion on whether or not Dash was a security. Now, luckily, by that point in time, we'd already done most of the research, and were able to share summaries of the legal opinions that we had developed at that point. And so we were able to help a lot of them out on kind of a one-on-one basis. But the SEC was very active, and they were becoming active not just with Dash, but with many cryptocurrencies. We submitted our letter, and then the following month met with the SEC in person in Washington, D.C. I flew out there along with Glenn Austin, our CFO, and we met with the SEC for the better part of an afternoon. It was a lot like sitting across from a giant inquiry. There were rows, like, tables of people that were peppering us with questions. A lot of them were, I would say, attempted gotchas. And since that meeting, I have not received a single inquiry. I believe that the objectives of educating the SEC, answering their concerns, has been met at this point. We have had some interaction with the SEC since, but it's taken a lot of effort on our part to get them to engage. They clearly don't want to engage at this point. And my opinion is that they do not view Dash as a security, and that is why it's been difficult to get them to advance the process. It's not an area that they have a concern with anymore.
So it's like no news is good news in this area.
My intention at this point is to answer any remaining questions that they have, and my guess is that we would never get a formal letter, but I think that's okay. I think we achieved the goal, and that's my personal opinion on it. Of course, without receiving any communication on the matter that I can share with the network. I don't know that with certainty, but my perception of the situation is that, and I think that we're in good shape. I think we have an extraordinarily strong legal argument for why Dash is not a security, and I think that message has landed.
Did they reach out to exchanges that we're already on, or maybe like a Coinbase, or do we know exactly? Or I guess you do know.
Yeah, they were all exchanges that had already listed Dash. This was, remember, last year, 2018, was really the year when the SEC began to educate itself and become involved. It was really the beginning of the year when they started to work on it. It was after the bubble was beginning to pop, but was still in full force. And they spent a lot of time last year. I'd say the first half of the year, they really didn't have a good grasp of what cryptocurrency even was, or how it worked, or what the different models were. I'd say by the second half of the year, they were starting to get educated, but they were beginning to just probe around, and it was kind of haphazard, I would say. And my perception now is they're becoming more mature, and I think we put forward such a strong legal argument that we're definitely not a target at this point.
Well, as exchanges were mentioned, it wouldn't be a podcast with Ryan if we didn't have the token Coinbase question. So,
Which new and improved has been expanded to when Coinbase, when Gemini. So to kind of expand that into a little bit more of a logical, reasonable question, what steps, if any, that are able to be disclosed, of course, have been taken to kind of court some of these major exchanges that seem to be kind of barriers to greater market growth in a lot of people's eyes?
Yeah. With regards to individual exchanges, I'm probably not going to be able to comment. What I can comment is that our own internal approach at this point has shifted from the smaller exchanges to the larger exchanges. Part of that is due to increased transparency in the organization, or in the industry. It's been really difficult in the past to understand where the volumes truly were. There's a lot of inaccurate information that the exchanges put out, a lot of wash trading that occurs on these exchanges. Bitwise and their report that came out as part of their presentation to the SEC, along with some websites and organizations that attempt to provide illumination into this, has allowed us to really focus on the exchanges that matter. We also have proven kind of proven out the model of instant send with some of the smaller exchanges, and that has given us ammunition with the larger exchanges, particularly with those features and the benefits that they can bring. Here's what I can tell you. I can tell you that I'm aware of 3 bit licensed firms that are currently engaged with their regulator on integrating Dash. Now, whether or not that will actually occur, I can't say. I'm not involved in the process directly. That's between their compliance department and their regulator. But I can tell you that we're seeing more interest in this than we've ever seen before. I'll provide a preview on something that I'm going to share on the quarterly call, we engaged in a project to illustrate the similarities between Bitcoin and Dash. And specifically, we've proven that the protocols are identical. And therefore, from a legal standpoint, there is no reason to treat us any differently than Bitcoin. I'll provide greater details of the project and what the results were on the quarterly call. But what I can tell you is that we have proven beyond all doubt that the two protocols are identical. Anything you can do in Dash, you can do in Bitcoin. And so we have presented that information to the exchanges. It makes it completely evident that there's no reason why private send should be a barrier, at least as far as a legal standing goes, to adoption. And we believe that they are using that information in their communications with regulators. This is making their compliance departments much more comfortable. And I think that what's important to them is being able to identify when a private send occurs, be able to appropriately risk score that, and be able to appropriately deal with that risk, along with other attributes of the transaction, including what the amount was and so on. There's also a precedent that's been established with Zcash. Zcash was accepted by the New York regulator as long as certain conditions were met, and being able to draw corollaries with what they were able to present to regulators that got them to that level of comfort is something that's been informative to us. So real short answer is we're almost exclusively focused on the larger exchanges at this point in terms of future integrations. Of course, if a smaller exchange reaches out to us, we're going to provide them with documentation and guidance and so on how to integrate, and we're going to help them through that process. But in terms of our outgoing business development efforts, we're finally getting traction in the larger end of the spectrum, and I expect results from our business development team this year.
What do exchanges tend to think about chain locks? I mean, have you approached that yet? I know it's not completely live yet, and of course that's a separate question, but
Sure.
I do know a lot of exchanges, especially for smaller coins, want, especially after they've been 51% attacked, which seems like a big, exchanges tend to be involved at one end of that whole nightmare, whether it's between, getting stolen from exchanges, being stolen and then put on exchanges. And of course, chain locks, it just like, you don't have to wait. It's just solid from the beginning. Has that been something you've approached exchanges with yet, talking about that? And if so, what do they seem to get it? Are they excited, or are they just like, we'll see?
No, the answer is that this is a value proposition for them, that they are excited about. They do see the value, not just for themselves in terms of risk mitigation, but we're also communicating the value of instant send and chain locks to their traders, which has a direct financial benefit to them, not just a risk mitigation benefit in terms of eliminating 51% attacks, but they can provide a better user experience. They can support arbitrage strategies that otherwise couldn't be supported. That drives incremental trades, incremental withdrawals, which they generally make a small profit off of withdrawals and deposits. And so this not only reduces their risk, it increases their volume and revenue. It's also a benefit to the traders. They benefit from a better user experience, the ability to capture arbitrage opportunities. So this message is resonating. And it is one of the reasons that we're able to go back and have multiple conversations, even with exchanges we've hit before. And the receptivity is very different now. They do understand the value, particularly after 51% attacks occurred towards the beginning of this year. So I'm very glad that we prioritized 14 or the chain lock functionality. It obviously rearranged our roadmap a bit, but this is having immediate impact.
Hey, Ryan.
Hey, is there, just real quick, is there a date set for the quarterly call or an estimate on that?
I believe it's set for August 8th or 9th. I forget the exact date. I believe our last one was May 8th or so. So it's approximately at the same time after the quarter ends. We wanted to draw it in maybe by a week, but this is also our fiscal year end. So Dash Core Group's fiscal year end is June 30th. So there's some additional tax and accounting type work that needs to go into this quarter, and that's usually the constraint that we work under is the financials. It's, putting together the rest of the presentation is generally something we can get done in a few weeks, but financials are usually the thing that takes the longest. So it's going to be difficult for us to draw it into like August 1st, 2nd, but I believe the date is set for the beginning of the second week of August.
You got lots of people excited there in the live chat, Ryan. When you said about this example you intend to do, everyone's like, when is it?
Yeah.
So that's
we have some legal work to do now that the technical work has been done, and so that's something that we will get done before the quarterly, and we'll share that information. I think it's going to be powerful.
Excellent. Well, I'm really pleased that Joel actually just mentioned Chainlocks. Is there any indication, or are you aware of when Spork 1920 Chainlocks will be activated? We've seen DIP 8. I'm guessing it's fairly soon, right?
Yes, it is very fairly soon. DIP 8 was automated. That took a certain period to lock in, and then there was a 1 week lock-in period. And I believe it was the beginning of this week when it went active on the network, if I'm remembering the timing correctly. In terms of DIP 19, Spork 19 and 20, what those are LLMQ-based instant send and chain locks. And there's one additional thing that needs to happen there, and that is we need to deploy an update to the iOS and web wallet. Android wallet. That is expected to occur early next week. The entire process is not within our control because on the Apple side, we have to wait for their approval. It generally comes pretty quickly. It's also advisable to wait a few days for the automated updates to roll out globally. That can take up to a week, but it generally happens faster than that. And those are kind of the last steps before we can activate. What we did want to do was get DIP 8 operating on the network, observe the DKG formation of quorums, proof of service, make sure that is operating as intended. So far, all of the boxes are checking through our process, and really the last step is, okay, let's deploy these new wallets and get a certain adoption level there, and then we'll trigger it. So I think that what we've seen is a very rapid adoption of 0.14. It's currently about over 99% of masternodes at this point. And we are seeing the establishment and participation in quorums for both the 50-member and 400-member quorums. We've also seen growing participation in each quorum type as the adoption of 14 grew. And so at this point, we're regularly seeing 98+% of maximum membership within those quorums at any one point in time. It's looking very healthy. So we don't see any impediments to continue to click off the steps that are necessary to get this fully deployed. And I think that what you'll see is as soon as those new wallet versions come out, we'll give it a little bit of time for some adoption on those, and then we'll trigger. So we're nearing the end of this process.
You said there's 50 and 400 member quorums. What's the difference? And is there any other? Are there larger ones? What makes the difference between those?
So there's different quorum sizes depending on the purpose. So chain locking instant send locking a single transaction requires a smaller quorum to agree on it than an entire block. And that's for security purposes. As you can imagine, it is worth taking a couple extra seconds to make sure that the quorum size is extremely large for locking a block with a chain lock.
Did we lose Ryan?
Oh,
Sizes. And that's the reason we have it's for efficiency versus security trade-off.
Yeah, Ryan, you dropped out for a couple seconds there, but we got you back there. But I think I think we got the gist of it. Yeah, excellent. Right. Let's move
Mark,
on.
you can ask a couple now.
Yeah, we got so many questions from the
I've
community.
been monopolizing everything when Brian's been hopping in.
No, it's fine. I just want to make sure we get through the community questions. So because there's so many. So let's stay on point then as we're talking about progress and free course. So one of the top questions was, what is the current status and progress of the Dashpay DApp? And are we still on track for version 1.0 launch this year?
In other words, when Evo?
Yeah. So the platform work continues to happen. We have a full roadmap at this point. We will be updating the community with the roadmap as well as the timing for that roadmap on the quarterly call. So on the last quarterly call, we talked about getting 14 fully deployed and that we will always follow this process where we get one version fully deployed before we publish the roadmap for the detailed roadmap, I should say, for the following version along with dates. And so we are nearing the end of version 14. That will be done before the next quarterly call. And so the next quarterly call, we will lay out that timeline. We do have all of the epics laid out. That's a technical term in software development about kind of the state of the planning. We have all of the plans detailed out at a highly detailed level from here through to evolution. That timeline is pretty solid at this point. And from what I've seen so far, the only changes I've seen to it have been to bring it in. Just this week on our weekly review of the development progress, they actually live shifted the Gantt chart in front of me, and that was a promising sign, I think. I think they planned that in order to wow the boss, but I think that the planning that has gone into it certainly gives me a really high level of confidence that they have really thought this through and know the tasks that lay in front of them. I think there might be some conservatism built in. So I'm hopeful that we'll have some good news to share with you on the next quarterly call in August.
In the next quarterly call. Yeah, because in the live chat, people were saying, just please tell us it's this year. So the next quarterly call, if that's August, that's not that far away. I mean, I'm guessing that's just going to be an update, but
that's when you're going to see the roadmap with the dates. And so we're committed to what we said on the last quarterly call, that we're going to share that as soon as 14 is fully deployed. We're probably, a week away from that point. And we'll share that at the next, quarterly call where we pull together all of the material to share with the community.
Yeah, I think everybody's happy with the speed of the software is moving and the updates, the weekly updates. I really like those. Appreciate that.
Software development is accelerating. It's good to see the improvements that have been made since Bob joined the team. The structure of the planning, the efficiency of the work that's going into it, the level of visibility that we have going out months at this point really helps make the entire process more efficient. I think we were on a 6 to 9 month release process just a couple of years ago, and we went through these process improvements with Agile being deployed to the team. We added more structure to the teams themselves, delineation of roles and responsibilities, bringing in Bob at CTO with a lot of experience with larger teams. All of these things have contributed to an acceleration. And what you've seen is the last 2 releases, we've increased the pace. Now the next one is a pretty large release. This one is the mammoth one, but it's definitely the pace of development has increased.
Yeah.
Excellent. Joel, I know you had a question on version 1.0.
Did I now?
Yeah, because it's such a major, significant release.
Yeah. So basically, I have a feeling that there's a lot of kind of sentiment and anticipation around version 1, not because kind of unfairly now, not because of what it actually will deliver, but just because it's been basically ever since Dash was rebranded, it's been kind of on the horizon for years, many years now. It's kind of like people just wait for that next thing. It's like that's what they've been told. That's the expectation that's been set, and they're kind of looking forward to that. Now, version 13, in my view, is a very massive update, and version 14 as well, all even to the next level. Definitely game changing. However, I don't get the sense that the rest of the rest of the industry took notice pretty much at all. I mean, there just has not been that much attention that has kind of fallen on these historic achievements we've had. Now, of course, some might be a little bit paranoid that the same thing might happen with version 1, that finally evolution's here, it's the most amazing thing ever, and kind of no one knows about it.
Yeah.
Do you have a plan to sort of make things different this time and get this to really make the splash that we know it deserves?
Yeah, I think that part of this is what has occurred in the crypto press, particularly in the last year and a half, and that is a tendency for technical progress to not be well covered. And this isn't just true of Dash. You look at Cointelegraph or whatever; they're not talking about technical under the hood things. That's not what attracts clicks. What attracts clicks is dramas and lawsuits and people claiming to be someone who they're not. And this is what sells. And we don't have a great deal of drama because our proposal system works. We're heads down. And I'm not making excuses. It's just an observation on the state of the press has really shifted away from wanting to cover technical issues. We get this in front of reporters, and to them, a technical article is unlikely to generate a lot of usage or a lot of clicks, and they tell us that straight up. So it makes it the environment we're in is a little more difficult to get those types of news articles covered. But that aside, I think you look at other projects. I mean, you're not reading about the progress that's being made in technical fronts on most of the other projects that are out there. There are other good projects out there like Stellar or that are making real headway, and they don't get good coverage either. As far as what we can do to try to address this, I think that number one is evolution is going to make a big difference for developers. And we need to spend a lot of our efforts to get in front of the development community that is building things on decentralized platforms and make sure that we're well represented there. We're actually doing a number of smaller events. We held one in Vietnam. We held one in Thailand. We held one in LA with developers to refine our message and get feedback. We've videotaped some of these so that we can see what works well and what doesn't. And so we are beginning to develop our plan for how we hold these types of events. We're doing them at a small scale. And obviously, this is before Evolution is available for them to try. But we are refining that message. And what we're planning on doing with that is develop a program around getting this in front of the development community so that exciting things begin to develop on our network. The second thing is, we've been working with our current PR firm to try to refine our approach given the environment. So given this environment, how do we, get the press coverage that we really deserve? And a couple of ways that we're doing that. One is I think we're de-emphasizing the smaller, blast it out to lots of different outlets and try and get coverage that way. And we're putting more of our efforts into let's get some good quality pieces done with a few of the larger publications. And we believe that if we take that approach, we can get better overall results. And we are seeing some fruit on that front. It does take longer to follow an approach like that. But I did an interview this morning with one of the larger press publications, and it went well. I think that, when they take the time to really understand it and understand the impact it can have, not just the technology and how cool the technology is, but why is this relevant? They really do understand it. And so I think that look for us to kind of shift our strategies a little bit on that front. The last thing was that 14 came out at a really inopportune time. The network had essentially fired Waxman prior to its release, and yet Shift was not yet onboarded. So we were between PR firms. We did what we could under that scenario, but I think that if we had full representation, we would have been in better shape. But we're not going to delay a release of valuable code for PR reasons, right? It's better to continue to make progress as a network. So there's been a number of issues that we've been dealing with. We are taking positive steps to try and make sure that this next release is well covered, and we're already beginning the socialization process on the impact and importance of this release, not just with press, but with developers themselves and influencers that are going to be helpful to getting that message out.
Is Shift, are they fully engaged now? I noticed we had that, was a CoinDesk article. Was that them or?
They fully engaged towards the beginning of this month was when they fully got onboarded. I don't know if they had direct involvement in the article that you referenced, but I just don't know off the top of my head. Fernando would obviously have a better idea than I would as far as what role they played in that. But definitely look for our focus to be on the more prominent publications and to expand not just beyond crypto publications. We're hoping to get in some mainstream publications as well and spend more time there. All of this takes more effort. And so the idea is fewer of higher quality publications is going to be more important for us at this stage than lower quality crypto focused publications.
Front page of Wired, title Bitcoin Evolved. Nah, one can dream, right?
Bring it on.
Well, I can give the Dash News perspective on that. We have weekly meetings with Michael, who is the Dash Core Group Marketing Manager, and they are going through a transitional phase. Obviously, we used to get press releases from Waxman, but now Shift are coming on, and I believe they're working on their first proper press release. So it obviously, when you come to a new project like Dash, there's a lot to learn, right? So there's a handoff process, and Shift is still getting to know the team, the direction, the message, understand what's happened before, but more importantly, develop a strategy on how to move forward. So there are things happening behind the scenes that even we've been involved in those conversations and communications.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have your PR firm show up day one and they've got all the perfect messaging, and they've got the history and knowledge and understand all of the terms. It takes a lot of time and effort on our part to educate and get them up to speed. I think that they're making good progress on that front, and the few interactions that I've had with them on specific targets and opportunities that we've had crop up, they do a good job of shepherding that message and making sure that the interviews are focused on the topics that the network really wants to put the story forward on, and so I think that they're doing a good job, considering they're a couple weeks in at this point. So
excellent. I've got a fun question for you, Ryan, and I really want to know the answer to this as well.
All right.
Okay, has Ryan had any communication or update from Evan or DashLab team members recently?
I have seen Evan in person. He's in town here for a bit, and managed to meet up with him. Talked about some of the things that he's working on, and I've not. I actually met a member of DashLabs this morning for the first time. I have not had direct interaction with most of those guys. I think that part of that is they were based out of Hong Kong for a long time. They're kind of spread out all over at this point. And so, I had someone in my office this morning to talk about some of the things that they've been working on, a white paper that they were hoping to be able to publish in the near future, use cases for evolution, which were interesting. Ways to leverage the data capability of the network in order to store data in an immutable fashion, and leverage that capability. So it seems like they have quite a number of projects that they're working on, and I hope they start to share some of that information soon with the community. I think it would be good to get an update from them on it. And I know that the most recent update that I saw was that they were hoping to publish a white paper on some of that work that they've been doing.
Excellent. Well, hopefully, I know we've had Tito on the YouTube channel before that Joel interviewed. So perhaps Joel can reach out to them, and either we can get them on the podcast or have another interview. I'm sure the community is very intrigued to learn more about this white paper.
Yeah. I mean,
Sorry, go ahead.
He tends to work on very long-term stuff and long-term vision. A lot of it is experimental, seeing whether or not a particular route leads anywhere. He's a very inquisitive mind. So, he's got a team of people working with him on inquisitive things, and we've seen what can crop out of that process before. And so, I think it's good to have them working on things and seeing if they can come up with something really killer for evolution is a good use case.
Excellent. Well, so I'm just trying to bang through these questions because we've got so many.
Sure.
Now, this question, if there ever is a thing called proof of emoji, this question was very popular with the Masternode network. So
POE was proof of Evan.
So will the Dashpay Android and iOS app have an open interface for exchange integrations to make it easier for regional exchanges to work with the Dash app like Uphold?
Yeah. And what about that Uphold fee too? People complain about that.
Yeah. Yes. We are in conversations on that issue. one of the let's start with the Uphold integration. It has been a resounding success. We Uphold saw a lot of signups through the app itself, which they can track and determine. So it was a customer acquisition thing for them. It's obviously an ease of use thing for our users to be able to access that within the app. So it's been a success. We've gotten good feedback on it. And it's clear that this is something that people value. One of the big complaints that we have gotten is around that fee for basically moving funds from Uphold to your own wallet. And the nature of Dash's transactions is our users actually use it. The average transaction size in Uphold is $75. The average user that is transacting on the network is around $15. And so people use this to actually make purchases and do things. That contrasts with other networks where the typical transaction is clearly a speculator or trader moving around money, thousands of dollars at a time.
Well,
And
you
so-
must read Dash News, because just this week I did an article about how Bitcoin's median fees are about 10% of the Dash median transaction value. Meaning, if I was buying the same stuff I'm buying with Dash with Bitcoin, I'd be charged at least a 10% fee on every single one of those.
Yeah. So, I mean, different use cases, right? I don't think you can make it a day-to-day transaction type, but point being, $3 is a hefty fee for such a small transaction. And so we have a commitment at this point that will be changing. At least if you're transferring your balance to your own wallet, within the app, at the very least, that transaction fee should go away, and they agree with us on that. There is some technical work that obviously has to occur, because this will differentiate Dash on their platform. This is not a Dash specific fee. They charge that fee for every withdrawal. So,
Most every withdrawal. I believe they
XRP,
waived the fee
yeah.
for XRP.
yeah, that's because we XRP's got
They're meat
boatloads of-
hooks.
yeah, they've got hooks. Yep.
Yeah.
So
Deep pockets.
yeah. So in any case, I think that this is an area that they agree with us, given our use case and given how people use Uphold and Dash together, that is a barrier for them. And so we're working on that. We're working on some other improvements as well, which we're excited about. One of the things you'll notice is that Dash's fee is lower than a lot of the other currencies on the platform, and a lot of them that are larger than us. I think the only one that is lower is Bitcoin, and that's due to their higher liquidity than we've got. But we want to maintain that. We think it's important for that fee to remain low. So it's not just the withdrawal fees. We want all the fees to stay low. At the same time, we're bringing a lot of benefit to Uphold. Being able to integrate into the wallets. iOS should be finally launching in the near future. I don't have a date for you today, but it should be in the near future. And lastly, I think the question was centered around, well,
Yeah,
what
Chuck,
about-
if you a reminder.
yeah, what about?
So that's the Uphold part. So
Yeah,
just to
what-
reflect on the question, it was.
Yeah,
So
well,
will the apps have an open interface for exchange integrations to make it easier for regional exchanges to work within the Dash app? So I'm assuming this is coming from masternode owners that are probably not in the scope of Uphold.
our intent is absolutely to make the Dashpay app far more extensible than the current one. Our intent is to continue to improve the user experience. And when you think of those things together, it absolutely makes sense that, Uphold doesn't even work worldwide, as you pointed out. It makes absolute sense for us to improve the functionality for all of our users. So, I think that the intent here is to move in that direction. Now, I don't believe that will be part of MVP necessarily. When we'd rather get a product out the door and have people using it than have all the bells and whistles day one. But we're making it in a way that it's extensible, that we can easily do those things and begin to offer those integrations. So, I think that we're headed in that direction. If you like what's happened with Uphold, you'll like the direction we're heading with the app overall. And it's not just exchanges; it's just making this extensible.
Excellent. Okay, guys. Any questions from you guys, or do you want me to carry on through the list?
Carry on through the list.
Yeah, there's one about Libra. People wanted your opinion on that.
I think so to be fair, I think you did a pretty giant tweet storm that I very much appreciated on that. I thought it was a perspective. It's a perspective that very few people have been expressing. Most people either tend to say this is going to kill all the cryptos. This is going to be a game changer. It's just game over. Bitcoin is dead. Or the other thing of like, no one cares because it's not decentralized. It's going to die because of that. And there seems to be a third option kind of perspective from more like a payments industry perspective.
Normally, I don't weigh in these stupid disputes that people get into, but I didn't see anyone with a fairly rational payment-oriented viewpoint on this thing. And so I thought I felt a compelling, overwhelming desire to put my own opinion on this one. But look, they put out there that their mission is to bank the unbanked and improve the lives of people and all these altruistic goals. I don't believe a single one of those organizations, except for a couple of NGOs, have that goal. And they all have different goals. And it's not the stated goal. These guys are going to end up bickering, and if the regulators don't get them, they'll get themselves. I just think it's when you really dig into the code doesn't even work. There's and I think they did that intentionally. Honestly, I think they did that to get this in front of the regulator sooner rather than later. Pre-announcing that they're going to do it wouldn't get them to act, but they know that they're going down a hell of a long regulatory path here. So why not start early? I don't. That's the only rationale I can think of for putting out a half-baked, terrible product and open sourcing it. And honestly, I as soon as things start getting difficult, I can't see this group sticking together. It's just laughable.
So we had a few questions about Libra, but this one's kind of framed a bit differently. Okay, so it is: how does Dashcall Group intend to target average users for Dashpay? What problem will it solve for them better than the Libra Facebook global coin? And how will this be articulated, approached?
Well, I think that it's validating that Libra is doing some things that we're well along the path towards. And our product will come out first for sure. And that is, they are making it accessible through APIs. They are making it extensible so that you can build things on top of it. They aren't attempting to be a smart contract platform. All of this is very validating because I guarantee they spent a boatload of money on how to go about strategy on this. And therefore, it's very validating for the strategy that we're pursuing. I think that as far as, whether or not I think that they are a direct competitor, I'm not so sure on that. I think that
you don't see them as competition?
No, I'm not saying that. I think that in some respects, all of these coins compete with one another. In some aspects, we compete with Monero. In some aspects, we compete with Bitcoin. In some aspects, we compete with Bitcoin Cash. But we're all distinct. We offer some different combination of things. And I think that there's obviously some component of Libra that we do share, and that is it sounds like very low cost transactions, ease of use seems to be there. So there's some aspects with which we will compete, but we are distinct. We do offer a different value proposition, and we are going to be first to market. And I think that Facebook obviously has the distribution that a lot of us don't. But I think when a lot of the coins obviously aren't going to be able to match. But I do think that it can be overall benefit to the market, and we've seen this express that people are going to determine that there are differences between these things. It gets them to understand that this is important. It has changed the conversation with merchants and exchanges and all of these things that they start to realize that this isn't going away. If anything, this is only going to get bigger. And then they want to understand the differences. They want to understand the value proposition differences between them. And that's making the conversations, I think, a bit easier. So I think it can help expand the overall market more quickly. And I think that we nonetheless are going to offer something different. And so I think there's good aspects to it. I think there's bad aspects to it, obviously. But honestly, I don't think Libra stands that much of a chance. I might be overvaluing my past experience with this, but anytime I see consortiums of competitors come together in the payment space, they don't play well together. And the closest corollary that I draw with this one is MCX, which was an abysmal failure.
I'm not even sure what MCX is. What is that? I'm guessing that's why it was a failure, right? But just for those that
is
are
it a
familiar.
rapper? Sounds like a rapper name.
Well, a lot of people joke that it was the Mike Cook exchange because it was Walmart's real push to get together all these different retailers and come up with an alternative to the card networks. It was meant as a means of reducing their card fees from Visa, MasterCard, American Express. And they got on board all of the largest players. Walgreens was there and Walmart, and even direct competitors like Target, I think, were part of it. So, they had all of the largest big box retailers in the United States on board with this concept. And it was a smartphone app that linked to your bank account and offered benefits and rewards and all kinds of different things. But ultimately, Walmart's needs were very different from a high-end retailer or even other retailers within the big box space. Walmart's needs were primarily around reducing fees, because Walmart lives on razor-thin margins. And their competitors they may have had much higher margins, and it was more about consumer choice to them. MCX attempted to prohibit other payment methods, other smartphone apps from being used by any of their members. But when Apple Pay came out, a lot of their members just chose to ignore that. The consortium started falling apart immediately. They all had different priorities. Best Buy, as you can imagine, was one of the first ones to default, because they want to attract Apple users to their stores. These are wealthy people who are buying high-end electronics. That's precisely the kind of person they want to draw in. And so, it didn't take long before people were abandoning their agreement with MCX. Ultimately, Walmart went their own way. They launched Walmart Pay. Just these consortiums, they don't tend to hold together. And you look at the people that are in this one, it's like Stripe, Visa, MasterCard. You've got PayPal in there. You think they all want the same model? It's crazy.
Yeah, that's like Fluffy Pony being on the diff board or something like that. It's like, what's he doing there? Certainly not to look after the best interests of this project.
Like I said, maybe I'm overvaluing my past experience in the payment space, but I've seen this play out like a half a dozen times at this point in live as it's occurring, and I took one look at this, and it looked exactly like all these past failures, and for the same reasons.
Mm.
And I think even the regulatory inquiries that are happening right now, I think certain members are going to be more likely to say, you know what, I don't need this. I don't need this right now. If I'm Visa or something, what the hell is in it for me? I think they're going to. I don't think this is going to stick together. They'll do their initial commitment to it, and then we'll see. I mean, for Visa, what's $10 million between friends? You know, they're
Exactly.
like, sure, I'll show me all your white papers, and like for $10 million, they want visibility more than anything.
So
So I've got my popcorn out. Basically, this is going to be like a real show.
Yes, I'll enjoy watching it as well. The last question from me, and then Mark and the community can fill in until your last call and everyone starts sweeping up and it's like it's time to go. It seems like, and the preface to this is one of the biggest strengths of the Ethereum community I've noticed is that everyone is trying to develop on it. If you're trying to build dApps, everyone jumped at Ethereum first, and then I'm sure that they've since gone other ways, and some of them, for example, gone to other projects like EOS, and that seems to be one project I don't say very many happy things about is Bitcoin SV, and one of these few happy things that I'll have to say is a lot of people are building stuff on top of Bitcoin SV, or just they're building stuff using which could build on any network, could build, there's nothing technically unique to the network that they have to, but there's a lot of momentum behind building and developing on top of this. Now, of course, with the Dash platform, with the evolution, it seems like it's going to be a complete dream to be able to develop on it. Now, what specifically is being planned to kickstart this, to get as many developers on possible, like say hold hackathons, do things like that, because it seems like there's not a lot of external development, as in not from the Dash DAO, external development happening on top of Dash.
Yeah.
And if that changes, that'll be a giant game changer. So basically, what are you planning on doing about that?
Yeah, I think there's a multi-pronged approach here. One is really great documentation. You look at world-class sites that focus on the developer community, they all have world-class documentation. They make it easy for the developers to get in and become productive. That means we need to invest in developing good documentation and a good documentation website specifically geared towards developers. You want sample code in there. You want snippets of code that they can copy and paste and get up and running quickly and start developing something. Because if you engage them at that level, they get excited and they start to, wonder what else they could do with it. And so I think that is, prong number one. You've got to have good documentation and a good accessible website. So that's something that we're prioritizing. The second thing is you do need to jumpstart the community itself. You have to educate the developers and you have to find them where they are. There are several ways that we can do that. We can hold events. We can hold hackathons. There's been a lot of excitement with some of the schools to be working with us. That have a computer science program and hosting hackathons on their campus because they do see the value in what we're developing compared with other platforms. And then I think there's also a component of doing online outreach. Like not all of this stuff is in person. A lot of these communities form in online environments, and being able to identify those that are going to be most relevant for us and doing some outreach there. Certainly the crypto community of developers is one of those places that we should be doing a lot of outreach as Evolution launch gets close and the documentation is available. So I think that's kind of the short answer. There's obviously much bigger, more detailed plans being pulled together right now by Fernando and his team. and we'll be, publishing those plans along with the evolution development toolkits around the same time. So, there's a lot more we can do. I interface with interesting groups all the time. There was a group that I met at Consensus that's based out of the Ukraine, and they've got hundreds of developers that they educate on the latest developments that are occurring within the crypto space. And can they do a program for us to educate this group? And of course, we're interested in doing that type of thing. So there are communities and networks out there that access these types of developers, and we're engaging with them as well. And so, I would say if there are good opportunities of these types of networks in other geographies around the world that our community members are aware of, they should reach out to the marketing team and make them aware, or provide an introduction. We'll move that relationship forward.
Yeah, I'd just like to add that if you are watching or listening to this and you are interested in the developer or hackathon side, make sure you subscribe to the channel, because in the future, we're going to have Liz and hopefully Dana from the Dashcore Group product team on, I think we've got Liz on the 5th of July, and we're going to talk a lot more in depth about this and ideas and, what the game plan, the strategy is. So if that does interest you, there's more content and more information on this coming further down the line. Ryan, let's get back to some questions, because I know the clock is ticking. There's only a couple left. So
all right.
Can you ask Ryan about the status of any trademarks or other intellectual property? Is there anything we need to be aware about?
Yeah, I mean, this is an ongoing process of both gaining more protection for Dash and the logo, as well as the defense against people that are infringing upon our trademarks. We have recently defended the Dash trademark in Turkey. Someone attempted to trademark Dash. They successfully did it with Monero and one other one. And we engaged local counsel to defend. We initially lost our objection to the trademark, and came back with a legal argument that included the evidence that this person was doing the same thing with other cryptocurrencies, and it was part of a pattern, and that helped us to win it. And so we successfully defended our trademark there. There's another instance that people bring up a lot, which is Dash Green. It's in the top 2,000 coins, market cap under $500,000. We did send them a letter. Given the status of their project, we do want to provide evidence that we are defending our trademark and providing notice to them that they violated it. Should they become a more important project, we would take further actions. But at this point, the developers are anonymous, and tracking them down would require, subpoenaing the service providers for their website and so on, and probably not worth it at this point. But we do take action against these types of nefarious actors on a regular basis. That's part of what our legal funding does go towards. In terms of proactively getting more protection globally, we have been engaged in a global project to expand the protections that we do have in place to additional jurisdictions, particularly throughout Latin America, throughout Europe, and some other locations that are more prominent for Dash. Covering the entire globe is very expensive. So we probably will fall short of that, but we are continuing as part of an ongoing process to continue with registrations and things. And so Expect us to continue to do more of that. I think that eventually, Dash will be, crossing my fingers, we'll be large enough to cover the entire globe at some point. And for now, we're kind of approaching that in a prioritized fashion and defending it when we need to.
Excellent. Okay, well, last final question for me, and then I'll let the others chip in, and then we'll round up because we're approaching the 2-hour mark.
Yeah,
I
we
told
gotta
you there
wrap it
was
up.
a lot of questions, but
You always pull me in for 2 hours.
yeah. Right. So I'd like to finish off just by talking about the health of Dash Core Group. Now, towards the end of last year, you published a blog post called The Sustainability of Dash Core Group, along those lines. And since then, we've seen amazing development from the core team. Development updates published every week on the Dash Core Group blog, which is fantastic. Can you just give us like a status health check update? So those that have been following the project for a while will be familiar that there's been a recruitment freeze. And in the past, you mentioned that you would kind of like to build up, not like your own treasury, but kind of like a stockpile just for safety measures for moving reserves. That was it, reserves for the future, right? So what's the current status? That this is the recruitment freeze still in place? Are you happy with the development and the team? Would you look to recruit, or are you at that sweet spot right now?
I think that there's a couple of critical roles that we would like to add. But I'm not ready to go crazy, right? Like I think that we need to take a very measured approach to this. As you'll see on the quarterly call, our own financial position has improved significantly this quarter. Just due to the higher price that we're experiencing, that reserve is beginning to build. We're getting to the point where we can start to unshackle some of those things that we've put in place. If the current price were to hold where it is, I think that we would be able to start to do more sometime this fall. And we do have some flexibility before then. If a truly critical need arises, we do have the flexibility to be able to do that. So we are building our reserves at the current price. What I'd like to be able to do when the reserves are where they need to be, I'd like to fully reinstate people's salaries. Remember, people took cuts or forego salary altogether while we went through this process. So I think we've been able to do that partially at this point. I'd like to be able to do that fully for obvious reasons. It's the only way that the project remains sustainable for people to stay involved in. The second is, I'd like to begin to hire for some of those more critical roles. And this time, I think we're doing it in a much safer way. One of my big reservations last year was, or towards the end of 2017 and even into 2018, is we did not have the entity fully set up yet and established with the trust. That means that in theory, I could have issued all the shares to myself instead of the trust and had a company with some valuable assets in it in the form of all the Dash securities or the Dash assets that we were holding at the time as a team. And so, neither the community nor myself were comfortable with that type of situation. So we needed to get that fully set up. Once that was done, we had the ability to then open bank accounts and things like that in the name of the company. And we really weren't able to hedge out that risk until 2018 was well underway. And by then, the majority of the hit had been taken. And of course, throughout 2018, with the price continuing to fall, it was a constant headwind for us. We did put the hiring freeze in place at the beginning of August, I think it was. And then, continued to manage costs. People stepped forward with the volunteerism that they did. And so it's taken us a while to kind of recoup where we were and be able to be in a position where I feel confident bringing someone in the door. and saying, yes, we're hiring for this position, and I'm not going to have to, reverse that decision in the near future because we've got sufficient reserves to protect against another price swing. We owe that to the people that we're bringing in, and now the network has the protections in place where I hope they feel comfortable with us being able to hold these reserves, and it appears like that support is there. It's been there from the trust protectors that were elected, and it's been there from the response we've gotten on the proposals. So, naturally, once we reach that point, we'd be scaling back on the need, and relying on the reserves and the income that we need to continue operating.
Excellent. Very good to hear. So sentiment in Dashcore Group overall is very optimistic. Everyone's excited about hopefully, Chainlocks next week. If I believe you said early next week, hopefully, not definitive, but ideally that would be the ideal time. And that's a huge news announcement within itself. Even we had news this week of other crypto projects looking to implement Chainlocks and stuff as well. And I'm sure
there's some virtual high-fiving occurring around the team right now. Like the Chainlocks is a big deal. And
back on the hopium, huh?
You know what?
Running strong.
Long living masternode quorum based instance end. I think people are undervaluing this. What this means is every transaction is going to be instance end. You're not going to be restricted by that 4 input requirement. You're not going to be restricted by 2000 Dash maximum. Every transaction is going to be locked. Every transaction will be instant. Chainlocks is an additional security feature on top of that. And so it's my belief at this point, Dash is going to be the most secure network that exists.
And to put that into perspective, Ryan, because I agree with you, I don't think people truly understand the real power of this. If with chained instant send transactions on this podcast right now, you could send me an instant send transaction. I wouldn't have to wait for confirmation time. I could send that on to Joel. Joel could send that to Justin. Justin can send that to Brian. All within one transaction. We don't have to wait for transactions, right? Because it's chained, right?
And not only can you do that, but then he can send it to an exchange and get credited instantly because the exchange knows that they're going to get that Dash confirmed in the next block. And that's cool what's really powerful. It's not just that you can forward this along. You can forward this along, and the person at the end of that chain of transactions has absolute faith that they're going to receive that funding.
Is that going to speed up the private SIN mixing as well?
I believe in the documentation on the updates on the blog .dash.org, there are improvements to private send via the long living masternode quorums. I don't know. Obviously, Spork 20 is dedicated to the instant send, but Chainlocks and long living masternode quorums overall definitely improved that. Liz wrote a really good blog post on that, breaking that down. So those that haven't read it, make sure you go and check that out.
Yeah, I'm actually, you may have stumped me on that one. I'm not sure if it speeds up the process by not requiring confirmations and it can just mix. I don't know the answer to that. I suspect that it probably opens that possibility. And so, given some testing, maybe we could implement something like that if they didn't. It's an interesting question. I hadn't thought of that one before.
Yeah, it does. There's so much that can be sort of extrapolated. I can imagine just sending someone across the world some funds and they instantly permanently have it, and they can instantly permanently move it to a merchant who could instantly permanently have it put on an exchange from there. And just you send it to, say, someone in Venezuela who then send it to the merchant, and the merchant decides to keep most of it, but that the other part instantly gets sent away and is confirmed on an exchange now, just within like 3 seconds. And I don't think, and honestly, my personal opinion is the reason why everyone isn't losing their minds over this is because people don't know how cryptocurrency works. Even people in the cryptocurrency world, they just think, oh, it's faster, it's slower, it works right away, or it takes a long time. Like, there's no clear, like, well, when is it actually secure? How secure is it when? And what is the practical process of how this money transfers across the whole world?
Well, I tell you, they may not know how it works, but they know how they experience it. And if they send a Dash transaction to an exchange and that exchange allows them to transact with it right away, and the next time they go to use Bitcoin and they transfer it and it says waiting for a confirmation, we'll credit your account in about an hour and a half, that's when they go, oh, these are very different.
Yeah.
And they have very different attributes. And
I
so I think people will learn about it through experience. And that's why it's so important for us to get instant send and Chainlocks supported on all these exchanges.
Yeah, I think painting a story is so much easier when it comes to utility rather than kind of like looking under the bonnet and seeing how things work under the scenes. I really loved the example, I believe, given by Alex Werner a while back, where he was just saying, imagine a child waiting at a bus stop to catch the bus home, and he's by himself, but he's got no money. And the mum sends an instant send transaction to that kid to pay the bus for the bus fare. Now, the mum can send via instant send transaction, and the kid doesn't have to wait for confirmation times. He can then just pay for the bus straight away, no waiting time. Can you do that with Bitcoin? Can you do that with Litecoin? Can you do that with Ethereum? This is like new territory. And I think when you frame the story like that in terms of real use cases, people will really see the power of Dash.
Oh, they immediately get it. They immediately get it. And we're at the point now where I think the exchanges are immediately getting it. They're immediately understanding the value. And so we're going to be pressing really hard on that front.
Now, what about wallets? Because the Dash wallets seem to recognize stuff pretty well. But I've had a thing where I hyped Dash up to a new user. They had a few other coins, so they had the Edge wallet, and I sent them Dash, and it said pending. And I was like, well, what you don't realize is it's not actually pending. It's really fully there, but Edge just doesn't, or Koinomi, or heaven forbid Jax doesn't, like, they don't recognize, they don't tell you that it's completely because they don't know how to. So is there the similar aggressive pursuit of trying to get all kinds of peripheral Dash accepting services like multi-coin wallets, for example, to also recognize this?
Yeah, I mean, so we have an overall outreach on 14 and what the new features are and that type of thing. I think that is going to be on our outreach path, but I don't think it's necessarily priority day number one. I think at the end of the day, we're limited in the resources that we have available to us. Oftentimes, those types of services, they're supporting a lot of different coins, and to do something specific for us, it can be difficult for a multi-wallet, multi-asset wallet to support something specific. And so I think we just get a little bit lower receptivity than those that are immediately benefiting from the use case of Dash. And so I think, yes, the answer is yes, we absolutely want to reach out to them. I want to see it supported everywhere. Is it probably the best place to start? Probably not. I think that we will get to it, and we'll put pressure on, we will inform, we will offer resources, we will offer technical support, we will offer all of those things. But if I had to choose between, getting this on Jack's wallet and similar and fully supported there versus getting it on some of the key exchanges, I know which one I'd pick. I think that the people that really embrace Dash, they tend to really use it, right? Like, they tend to actually get a Dash wallet that's full featured and use it for its intended purpose. I don't think that people are going to let the fact that they have a Jax wallet prevent them from benefiting from these things, if they really want to. And I think that a lot of the use case behind those are I'm investing in lots of different cryptocurrencies, but it's as an investment. They aren't using 12 cryptos, right, that are sitting in their Jax wallet. I think that that's primarily aimed at an audience that's investing. But if you actually want to use Dash and you want to transact with it, you want to use it at the point of sale, and you want to do these things, you have purpose-built wallets for that. And so I don't think we're preventing anyone from being able to access the benefits. But I think we do have to prioritize. That's just the nature of this. We can't do absolutely everything and reach out to everybody all at once.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Ryan. We've gone over the 2-hour mark. So out of respect for Ryan, because he does have a busy schedule, I'm very thankful to you, Ryan, for coming onto the podcast and taking questions for 2 hours. You know, it's not easy being interrogated for 2 hours. So respect where it's due. Thank you so much for coming on.
Well, thank you. And thank you to the community for the questions. I hope that I illuminated a lot of things, and I hope that I gave answers that people are happy with. It's difficult to keep all people happy all the time, but we're trying really hard, and it's been a good year for us so far, I think.
Excellent. Okay, and just before Joel takes us out with a close-in, just one last reminder about the Dash Investment Foundation proposal. Only 7 days left to vote. If you're a masternode operator, please go to Dash Central or Dash Nexus. Check out that proposal. It's really essential. I believe Ryan has already commented and applied some questions. If you do have any more concerns, comment on the proposal. We're all going to be looking at it. And also, if it's your first time learning about Dash and you see how excited and animated we are when we talk about it, because this is new in this space, this hasn't been done before. As I said at the start of the
another
podcast,
Dash first, right?
Exactly. We're the trendsetters in this space. So make sure you go to blog.dash.org and you can read all about the Dash Investment Foundation. There's a couple blog posts on there that will take you from 0 to 100. And also, don't forget the election going on right now. So go to dashwatchbeta.org and you can check out the profiles for the candidates for the 4 supervisors that need to be elected. And voting ends on July 2nd. Don't wait. Go check it out. Make sure you go vote. Okay, Joel, do you want to take us out?
Yes, don't forget to like, comment, share, subscribe, particularly smash for Dash. It is a tradition of our people. Smash that like button, smash the subscribe button, hit the bell, make sure you get all this. And in case you're one of those people out there that listens to this in the gym, on the treadmill, there's an audio only version. It's going to come out tomorrow. It's going to be posted. All the links are going to be posted. So look forward to that. And of course, for those of us, for people that actually think we're swell people and not just informative, we do this thing called the after party, which is similar to this, but much more casual, many more people, and up until the wee hours of the morning sometimes. So if you want to get in on that, you go to the Dash Talk Discord. I already hear Mark typing away. That's staydashy.com. That gets you there. And then just start asking around for where the after party is at, and then someone will plug you in. So that's my piece.
Excellent. Thanks, Joel. So that was episode 109 of the Dash podcast. Thank you to Ryan for coming on. Hopefully, in next Friday's podcast, we're going to have someone from the crypto.com team come on to talk about the recent integration where you have the ability to buy and sell Dash with their app, but also have a debit card as well. So hopefully we can get confirmation and we can look much more into that, because I know the community really was very receptive to that announcement earlier on in the week. So make sure you like, share, and subscribe. As Joel said, smash for Dash. And yeah, it's Friday night here. So wherever you are, have a fantastic weekend. Stay positive, stay humble, but most importantly, stay dashy. Have a good weekend, everyone.